Hello, Jamie and Linda and Sven. So we'll start in just around 5 minutes or so, give people time to join in. It's very exciting that we're all gathered here for this purpose of becoming enlightened. So there's definitely a lot of wonderfulness about the moment. Anyone have any question or anything to share before we start today?
Maybe just something to share. I remember reading earlier, just talking about the analogy of everything being like a rotten apple, and I was making pasta the other day, and I found a pepper, and it was rotten, and I tried to find a place where the pepper was not rotten, and the whole pepper was rotten the way through. And it just reminded me of that same analogy of the apple. It's rotten the way through. It's always going to be unsatisfactory. Just found that coincidence quite funny.
So your life is just like that rotten pepper, rotten all the way through. Unsatisfactory. All of our life, all of our relationships, our friends. Wow. Pretty dark, pretty miserable. But somehow not quite. Because when we can be disenchanted, no longer stuck in the spell of our sensory experiences, then we can have a much brighter, deeper peace and happiness. So thank you for sharing that. We got some vegetables today or yesterday on Alms Round when we walked through the farmer's market that were partly rotten, but not rotten all the way through. So, hi Sydney, nice to see you. And Maya and David. Welcome Mike and Smen. And Susan on YouTube. Just gonna grab something before we start. I'll be right back. Okay. Hello, Anna and Braden and Siraj. Okay. So let's start our Buddha Book Club today with some meditation. So we can find our meditation position, whatever that might be for you. Okay, so we find our meditation position, a comfortable and stable place to put the body down. We can close our eyes and begin to turn the mind around so that we start to be mindful, aware of the body. A good way to do that is following the path of the breath as it flows in through our nose, into the nostrils, down the throat, through the chest and into the lungs, feeling the lungs expanding. The mind coming home to the body. Becoming aware of the body sitting here at this moment. Allowing this moment to be complete so that there is nothing lacking, nothing to get rid of, but just the completeness of sitting here right now, breathing deeply, being aware of the body. It's easy to see our body as a story, as a kind of chess piece in the game of our life, the game of our past and future. We invest so much time and energy into thoughts about the body, desires relating to the body, fears relating to the body. So bringing up a sense of curiosity and sincerity as we follow the breath flowing into the body, filling up our lungs. What is this body? What is it like to have a body at this moment? What do you notice about it? What is the experience like? Closing our eyes and turning our attention inward, following the breath. Being aware of the sensations in the body. Just sitting and breathing. Nothing complicated going on. Nothing to miss out on, nothing to get, but just allowing ourselves this moment to let the body be still, to feel the breath as it flows in and flows out. Allow the breath to find a simple, natural rhythm. The source of most of our difficulties and confusions in life is a complicated selfishness. Complicated, convoluted, multi-layered ideas about ourselves and others, the world, the past, the future. This is our chance. This is the moment to put down, to detach from all these heavy, complicated ideas. Now, this isn't wishful thinking. This is to look into the nature of your experience at this moment. What is really going on? What is really happening right now? Not your nonsensical thinking, talking to yourself. But at this moment, what is it like to be alive? And we ask this question, we look into it directly by practicing the meditation method. Focusing, following the breath as it flows in and flows out. We tend to be very arrogant because most of us are living like kings and queens. We have hot water, cheese, coffee, nice clothes, nice bed, magical portals into different dimensions that we call screens. So much privilege, so much freedom for leisure, for relaxation. So we can feel very arrogant, very self-indulgent. But what is really precious? What is really essential? The breath is more valuable than gold. So when we sit in this way and we focus on our breath, we start to blow away the clouds of our self-indulgent, arrogant ignorance. Oh, my computer is so valuable to me. My personal preferences are so valuable to me. What I think is so valuable, so true. If right now, at this moment, someone brought in front of you a bar of gold, pure gold, and you had to choose between one more breath or that bar of gold, you wouldn't need to choose. There wouldn't be a moment of consideration. So as we feel this breath entering our body, as we feel this breath going out, we are really touching the treasure of our life, the joy of our life, the peace and healing of our life. The breath is truly a treasure. So at this time, our bodies sitting down, sitting still, giving our full attention to this precious breath as it flows in and flows out. Just a few more moments to enjoy this practice of just sitting, just breathing, just being aware until we hear the sound of the bell. If you feel that your heart, mind, or body is impoverished, is lacking something, don't be shy to fill your lungs with gold, to breathe deeply and inspire this peace, joy, strength, gratitude. This precious, joyful breath is always accessible to us. just breathing and being aware. So let's begin our continuation of Ajahn Brahm's book, The Art of Disappearing. And we're on part 3, chapter 3, Developing Mindfulness. When we are practicing meditation and living our daily lives, one of the most important qualities to understand and develop is mindfulness. If you don't have mindfulness when you're sitting on your cushion or walking on your meditation path, you're basically out of control. If no one is at the steering wheel, the vehicle just veers all over the place and may crash or go off the road. Mindfulness is what the Buddha called a controlling faculty. It needs to be developed because without it, there can't be any development of stillness. Many years ago, when I was still an inexperienced meditator, sometimes half an hour would go by without my knowing what I was doing, because my mindfulness wasn't sharp. I would fall into old habits like drowsiness or boredom. Mindfulness is the most important of the faculties for stopping these old habits from returning. In addition to awareness, you have to understand what you are supposed to be doing. You need the instructions, the will, and the inclination to do what is required. Having the motivation is important, since if you don't feel like training the mind, it simply won't happen. But when you have the mindfulness, the understanding of the instructions, and the motivation together, chances are you will get somewhere in your meditation. So it's very hopeful as long as you have that motivation, you have the interest in training your mind, understanding of the instructions, so the meditation method, and the mindfulness, the presence of mind, to be aware of what's happening right now. Then it's very likely that you will make progress in your meditation and in the training of your mind. Understanding mindfulness. To cultivate and nurture mindfulness, you have to understand what it is. People have many different ideas about mindfulness, but they often forget that mindfulness has many different strengths and qualities. In just one day, mindfulness can vary from being dull, like a fog where you can't see clearly, to being sharp and fully alert, like a brightly lit room. If you have experienced deep meditation, you know how powerful mindfulness can be. There really is such a thing as very sharp and penetrating mindfulness, and that's what we need to develop. The way to do this is by training the mind. In the previous chapter, I mentioned mindfulness of the body. Developing mindfulness of the body is a relatively easy first step, and as an additional bonus, it may improve your health. As you start off, the more sensations there are in the body, the easier it is to develop mindfulness. But because of that diversity, mindfulness cannot get very strong. To develop powerful mindfulness, you have to be aware of simple and precise objects. You grow mindfulness in the same way you grow a tree. You start with a little seedling, but eventually you have a huge piece of timber that is very strong and powerful. In the same way, you start with ordinary mindfulness, but then you build it up. It's important to remember that mindfulness can only really exist in the present moment and with a silent mind. Moment by moment awareness should be your initial goal. Don't name things. When you give something a name, you're not really aware of the thing. You're only aware of its label. Unfortunately, people with a Western education have been brainwashed into giving things labels and names. They don't see things as they actually are. They're just mindful of the words that describe them. That means mindfulness doesn't really penetrate. So especially when we first start meditation practice, that moment by moment awareness should be your initial goal, your initial kind of stepping stone that you'd like to move towards. Because we go from a mind, a state that is constantly involved in story, constantly going from one label to another label to another label endlessly, infinitely. We're stuck in a movie for the rest of our lives, some people, right? But when you can get to that moment-to-moment awareness, you can start to touch, start to see things as they actually are at this moment. You can start to kind of rub up against reality itself. Sensations as they are, what's happening in the present moment. So if we can get to that point, then we can really get involved with our meditation practice more and more. And so there's this kind of doorway to reality through being aware of things as they are moment by moment. Because reality is not what we think about it. It couldn't be. In relative terms, it might be, but it couldn't be the story, the labels that we put onto things, because they are just that. They're just labels. They are not the actual thing. I was listening to someone, his name's Sadhguru, and he, a very eccentric kind of Hindu teacher I was listening to recently. And he was talking about, he was on an expedition doing a survey about tigers, okay, in India. And so they do all this research, they look at all these footprints, they have such such this strong idea about tigers, right? And they're looking for them, they're waiting to see them. But at that instant that you hear the growl of a tiger, especially when you're on the ground, you're tracking, you're doing a survey, at that moment, all of your information about tigers goes away. It immediately vanishes. So a tiger is not a tiger. A tiger is a tiger. So it's this recognition of that. So it's important to remember that mindfulness can only really exist in the present moment and with a silent mind. Moment by moment awareness should be your initial goal. Don't name things. When you give something a name, you're not really aware of the thing, you're only aware of its label. Unfortunately, people with a Western education have been brainwashed into giving things labels and names constantly. They don't see things as they actually are, they are just mindful of the words that describe them. That means the mindfulness doesn't really penetrate, doesn't go deep. Anyone have something to say about this? A question about this?
I have a question. Uh, if I'm going out walking mindfully, um, shall I concentrate on the wind, the
No.
feeling when I'm walking on the ground, or can you explain what my the instructions? Because when I'm out walking, it's so much the sun and the wind and the grass or something I walk on. Uh, how shall I think to do it mindfully? I can't walk and close my eyes.
So you have to have the motivation, which you have. You have to feel like training the mind, which you probably feel like that. And then you need the instructions, the understanding of the instructions. So be mindful of your body walking. You can be mindful of the feeling of the wind on your body. And just stay in the present. Don't fall into a stream of thinking. And when you notice yourself falling into a stream of thinking, go back to your foot. Okay, I got a little bit of a technical there. So go back to your foot. We were talking yesterday or the day before about the grocery store. Instead of working yourself into a panic attack when you go to the grocery store, thinking about what other people think of you and who you are and what's going on, just focus on your foot. Be focusing on the foot. So be mindful of what's happening. You don't need to focus too intensively on one particular thing if you're just going for a walk, but have the focus on being mindful in general. And when you get caught up in thinking, come back to mindfulness of the body, the feeling of the body, the steps on the ground, the wind on your face, whatever it might be. Okay?
I have a
Okay,
question about a follow-up question.
thank you.
Okay, Jacob, you have a follow-up question? Go ahead.
Yeah, is there like a risk of becoming too attached to being mindful? Like maybe, um, yeah, just like clinging to that idea too much.
Yeah, there's a risk of clinging to that idea too much, but not of doing it. So the idea of being mindful is not mindfulness. It's just a label that we put on it. So it's not actually that. It's a long, involved process. It's a way of living in a different way, and it's a training. And so it's something you come back to again and again and again and again, and the mind changes. Your understanding of what it means to be mindful changes, grows, develops. It goes from a kind of shallow, bare bones, old dried up tree of mindfulness to fruit, to a really robust, healthy tree that has fruit on it. So there's not really a worry about becoming too attached to mindfulness. There's a worry about getting too attached to the idea of mindfulness and not putting it into practice.
Thank you.
For a lot of this stuff, it says it right here. Ajahn Brahm says it here that people with a Western education, and that's basically everyone nowadays, have been brainwashed into giving everything labels and names. They don't see things as they actually are. They're just mindful of the words that describe them. That means mindfulness doesn't really penetrate. So that means we don't really have a penetrating idea or connection to reality. We're just stuck in the labels. And you can spend your whole life doing that. Doesn't matter if it's a Buddhist label or a meditation label. If you're just constantly labeling things all the time, sure, you can spend your whole life doing that. So when we practice mindfulness, it's to put down the constant stream of thinking and to be aware of what's happening at this moment, not relying on thought. And so we can empathize with that idea. We can empathize with the words describing that, but to do it is not those labels, is not those ideas. Okay, thank you for your question, Jacob. Sydney, did you want to share something? Go ahead,
So I was
Sydney.
just wondering about,
Yeah,
oh, hi, how you doing? I
yeah.
was just wondering about like interactions with others. 'Cause I've been thinking about like sometimes I need to be a little bit more cognizant of things that I say or do or react. Do you think mindfulness is another way of doing it? Because I know it's not like you're quieting your mind or sitting still or walking, but I was just wondering about that too. Like, how do you feel or think about that?
Yeah, so you can come back to mindfulness of the body or mindfulness of the breath, mindfulness of your state of mind, to be aware of what's happening in the present when you encounter other people, and then you can respond to the situation rather than reacting to it. So that moment of mindfulness gets us an opportunity to put our shoes on before we go walk through the mud or before we go for a run. We kind of put ourselves in our own feet, we get grounded, and then we can respond to whatever that situation is. And a lot of times people just want to be listened to, and so mindfulness is a great way to practice compassionate listening. Um, just listen to what they say, and I like to think about it as this opportunity to restart and refresh. You get so bogged down in your ideas of this person and this relationship and this environment and this situation and what you should say and all this stuff, and then just in a moment of mindfulness you can, in some way, you can penetrate to the reality of the situation, which is none of that. It's just what you're experiencing right now. And it's if in that moment you lose your arm or you have a heart attack, that's going to become very, very clear. But the truth is that that presentness, that dynamic aspect of reality as it is always present, whether you have a heart attack or not. It's just that sometimes those extreme changes put us into that immediacy, that aliveness of the truth that everything's changing, nothing's permanent, and our intellectual thinking mind cannot grasp, does not know what is going on. If you think you know what's going on, then you can be sure that's not what's going on. So you can kind of refresh, restart, relax with that mindfulness of the breath or the pain in your knee or the foot, whatever it is. Anything else? Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sydney, for that. All right, so we can continue on with our reading. Oh, Viraj want to ask a question. Go ahead, Viraj. Can you try now?
Hi, it was more of a. I don't think it's in context now anymore, but when I'm walking in the street and I try to be more mindful, I just try to concentrate on the movements of my body and, for example, how my arms move when I walk, and that just brings my mind back to my body, and I'm just more conscious.
Okay, thank you, Viraj. Appreciate that. And you know, in social situations, a lot of times we feel awkward, right? We feel strange. Imagine not having eyebrows and wearing a monk's robe and walking down the street in southern Italy. It's a strange situation. You know, you're certainly not you're not fooling anyone. They see right through you. You know, they can see that you're odd. So be with that awkwardness, and you know, like Viraj said, you know, swing your arms around and be mindful of that. Be mindful of what you're feeling at that moment. So to be in the present. Okay. So establishing mindfulness. As you make present moment awareness and silence important goals, you find that mindfulness starts to increase and that you become sharper, more aware, and more able to see deeply into things. You are waking up, but it requires training. There are many tricks you can use. Where am I? What am I doing? What am I up to? And it's very special to ask those questions and not just come up with your regular old answer. You know, well, I'm Bante. I'm Bante Warpagno. I'm at the temple here in southern Italy. You know? Well, that's one way to answer it, but it's not. It's not. It's easy. It's an easy out, right? So to really ask in this open-ended way, where am I? What am I doing? What am I up to? It's really special, you know. to do this, to wake up. A good example of this technique is the way we used to do walking meditation at Wat Pa Pong in Thailand. Ajahn Chah always used to remind us at the start, know that you are at this end of the path. When you reach the other side, know that you are at the far end of the path. Next, establish mindfulness at the beginning and end of one particular section of your walking path. Even if your mindfulness wanders off in the middle of that section, at least you bring your mind back to the present moment at the beginning and the end. The next stage is to be mindful in every part of the walking meditation. It's very useful to establish this sort of mindfulness because you're training yourself to be mindful while you're active. Then you may be able to be mindful when you're eating or in the kitchen washing up. You are actually present with what you're doing rather than trying to get it over with or thinking about something else. Mindfulness really develops when you put 100% attention into what you're doing now, not thinking about what you're going to do next. When you train like this, putting everything into the moment, you are developing attentive energy that is focused on the now. If you're writing a letter, focus all your energy on writing that letter. If you're meditating in your room, focus all your energy on that. By putting your attentive energy into one thing at a time, it doesn't blur into the next activity. When one activity is finished, drop it very quickly. Don't allow one thing to blend into another. As soon as you sit down, you're doing sitting meditation. When you're on the toilet, you're just on the toilet. When you're brushing your teeth, you're just brushing your teeth. Whatever you're doing, put all your attention into that activity. It's not a waste of time or a preliminary practice. So, of course, we're not able to do this 100%, 1,000%, just like that because we hear it or we think that we should do it. And it's not about that. It's beginning to practice in this way and encounter limitless failures, limitless difficulties, but recognizing that to just do one thing at that time is liberating. It's not a preliminary practice. It's actually a liberation to just do what we're doing. And eventually, any normal everyday activity can be this access point to joy and to peace, to waking up. So when we do that one thing at a time, we're living in a much more grounded and realistic way. And we're less prone to that complicated, multi-layered, multi-dimensional, past, future mind getting the best of us, getting entangled in us, which causes us so much strife and sufferings. So whatever you're doing, put all your attention into that activity. It's not a waste of time or a preliminary practice. When you put your energy into focusing on this moment, you are developing mindfulness. By watching out for inner speech and trying to stop it early on, by developing moments of silence and extending those moments of silence, you are improving your ability to just be here, attentive, knowing, and aware. You are abiding in the moment, not going anywhere, not rushing off into the future. Because the mind is silent, you are totally passive and receptive to whatever is happening. Being passive and receptive is not only a good description of mindfulness, but also a prescription for increasing that mindfulness. In fact, one of the basic principles of mindfulness is that its intensity, its energy, is built on stillness. The more still you are, the more mindfulness increases, and the sharper it becomes. By allowing the thinking process to end and not giving things a name, most of the movement of the mind stops. This creates the stillness that gives rise to energetic mindfulness. That's why these states, where there is little inner conversation, feel so powerful. If your mindfulness is sharp, you can catch thoughts as soon as they arise, when they're still easy to stop. But once you get into a fantasy, conversation, or plan, the thinking process gains momentum and becomes much harder to stop. It's just like a train. Although a train is heavy, if it has just started to move out from the station, it's easy to stop because it's still moving slowly. But once that train is hurtling along at 100 kilometers an hour, it takes a long time to stop, simply because the momentum is so great. In the same way, don't allow the thinking mind to build up momentum. Stop it before it starts traveling too fast. If you stop the thinking at this early stage, your mindfulness will not dissipate, but will actually increase. Getting mindfulness started is the hard part, because you don't really know what you're doing, and you can't see clearly. Once you've got mindfulness going, you're more aware and alert. And because you see what's happening more clearly, it's easier to stop the thinking process and remain in the present moment. It's just like being in a very dark room. You can't even see well enough to put the light on. I really like that analogy. Maybe when we're in a depression, or when we're in an anxiety, or when we're deep into kind of problems that we've set up for ourselves, we get the room becomes so dark that we can't even find the light to turn it on. We can't even find the starting point to refresh, to restart, to take a step back, because we're just in pitch black. And that's definitely what it's like when we get started in meditation practice. You know, I remember for me, I just had to bumble around and find myself in all kinds of strange and interesting places until I eventually found a space that really contained my mind, and, you know, bounced enough in the walls of that space, the container of that environment, where, yes, my mind was dark, but I was in that container. So bouncing around enough, and then I found that light switch to turn the light on. We start to, you know, brighten up our mind and brighten up our life so that we can get out ahead of those very intense, complicated thoughts. And then we are not going to find ourselves in those intense, complicated mental states. Yeah, you might get depressed, you might get anxious, you might have relationship difficulties, but it's not going to have the momentum that it would otherwise when we have this mindfulness, this awareness of the present. So getting mindfulness started is the hardest part, the hard part, because you don't really know what you're doing and you can't see clearly. Once you've got mindfulness going, you're more aware and alert. And because you see what's happening more clearly, it's easier to stop the thinking process and remain in the present moment. It's just like being in a very dark room. You can't even see well enough to put the light on. However, once you have a little bit of light, you can see the switch to increase it. Mindfulness and awareness are the light of the mind. So the first thing to do is build up mindfulness by developing present moment awareness. That is, by putting energy into the moment. Try to be very silent and maintain that as long as you can throughout the day. The more time you spend in the present moment, the stronger your mindfulness becomes. It's like waking up from sleep in the morning. At first you're a bit dull, but after a while you become aware and energized and you actually know what's going on. Over the course of a retreat, you can watch that morning dullness disappear as your awareness grows. Awareness is there just before you go to sleep, and it's there when you wake up again. It's wonderful to see for yourself that by reducing activity and conversation and increasing meditation, you can sharpen your mindfulness, hour by hour, day by day. Okay, so that's where we will stop today. Let's spend a few moments to practice meditation together. So we can find our upright, shoulders back, chest open, back somewhat straight. For our chin, we don't want our chin to be too high, like we are some kind of English royalty. And we don't want our chin to be too low either, because this isn't something to be ashamed of, to be carrying our head low like that. So just finding that balanced, stable position. Starting to turn our mind inward, finding that treasure of the breath, so valuable, so precious, even more precious than gold. My goodness, a bar of gold and you choose the breath instead. So it's really something, it's not and nothing to laugh at. It's really precious. So starting to connect with the breath. To calm the body and let these Dharma seeds, these wonderful teachings that we've all listened to, just plant themselves in the soil of our body and mind. Thoughts may come up, but not letting the hairs on our thoughts grow too long. Going back to the breath, restarting, refreshing, connecting with that silence of the mind, that present moment awareness. So at this time, we can all bring our hands together, and to finish with our gathering today, we'll just say a prayer of metta, a prayer of loving kindness. So what is a prayer? We just to express our very deep intentions for loving friendliness, for peace in the world, and we can do that together. Okay? So repeating after me. May I be well, happy, and peaceful. May those who I love be well, happy, and peaceful. May those people who I hardly know be well, happy, and peaceful. May those that I dislike be well, happy, and peaceful. In all directions, inside and out, may all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May those in danger be safe. May those who are unhappy be happy. May the benefits of our practice benefit all beings, and may all beings benefit our practice. May it be so. May it be so. May it truly be so. Sadhu. 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 Okay, thank you all for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day and life, and hope I will see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bhante, thank you all.